Imagine you wake up one morning and the headline reads, "Iran has the bomb." Not that Iran is close to the bomb, not that Iran might be building the bomb. Iran has tested a nuclear device. The markets open and immediately halt trading. Saudi Arabia announces it is accelerating its own nuclear program within hours. Turkey places an emergency call to Pakistan's president. Israel goes to maximum military alert. The United Nations Security Council convenes an emergency session that accomplishes nothing because Russia and China veto every resolution. And the President of the United States stares at a map and realizes that the strategic calculations of the last 50 years have just been rendered obsolete in a single morning. This scenario has been the nightmare haunting every American president since Jimmy Carter, every Israeli prime minister since Menachem Begin, every Saudi king since the 1980s. And for 7 decades, the world has managed to prevent it. Until now. Because in 2026, the question is no longer whether Iran can build a nuclear weapon. The question is whether the bombs already falling on Tehran have actually stopped it. And the honest answer from the world's leading nuclear analysts is deeply unsettling. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear changes everything about how you see this war, this region, and this decade. Let's dive in. First, let's go back to where this story begins. Because here is the historical irony that nobody in Washington likes to talk about. The United States gave Iran its nuclear program. Not metaphorically, literally. On March 5, 1957, the Eisenhower administration signs what it calls a proposed agreement for cooperation in the peaceful uses of atomic energy with Iran. It is part of a program called Atoms for Peace. Eisenhower's idea is generous and strategically logical. Share civilian nuclear technology with friendly governments around the world. Let them build research reactors, study nuclear medicine, generate electricity, and in doing so, build a global coalition of countries with a stake in the civilian nuclear order, rather than the military one. Iran, under the Shah, is a close American ally. In 1967, the U.S. supplies Iran with a 5-megawatt nuclear research reactor. It is installed at the Tehran Nuclear Research Center. It runs on highly enriched uranium provided by the United States. In 1974, the Shah announces a breathtakingly ambitious program. Iran will build 23 nuclear power plants within 20 years. American, French, and German companies line up for the contracts. Westinghouse, Framatome, Siemens. Iran is going to become the nuclear energy hub of the Middle East, with full Western blessing and Western technology. And then, 1979 happens. Khomeini takes power. The Western companies pull out. The nuclear power plants are left half-built, and the program that the United States created to give Iran peaceful nuclear energy begins its slow, secret transformation into something else entirely. Now, let's zoom out to the bigger picture, because the history of Iran's nuclear weapons ambition is not a straight line. It is a story of stops and starts, of decisions reversed and reinstated, of international deals made and broken, of centrifuges spinning in secret tunnels beneath mountains. For most of the 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq War, the nuclear program is largely dormant. Iran is fighting for survival with conventional weapons. It does not have the resources or the stability to run a serious nuclear weapons program. But something changes in 1988 when the war ends. Iran has just used chemical weapons used against its own soldiers and civilians, deployed by Saddam Hussein with Western acquiescence. Iranian military commanders draw a conclusion that will shape the next 3 decades. The world stood by while Saddam gassed Iranian troops. The only deterrent that could have prevented that was a weapon the world takes seriously. A weapon that makes any adversary think twice about conventional attack. A nuclear weapon. The decision to restart and accelerate the program is made at the highest levels of the Islamic Republic in the late 1980s. From that point, the program is not a question of if, it is a question of when.
Congratulations,
Now
Minister.
here's where it gets interesting. Because from the early
you.
1990s
We have
onward,
finally
a
reached
shadow
the
program
conclusion.
develops alongside the declared civilian nuclear activities. The declared program is run through the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, the legitimate civilian body. The weapons program is run through a separate covert structure. In 2002, an Iranian opposition group called the Mujahideen-e-Khalq holds a press conference in Washington. They reveal the existence of two secret nuclear facilities that Iran had never declared to the International Atomic Energy Agency: a uranium enrichment plant at Natanz and a heavy water production facility at Iraq. This revelation is a seismic moment. The IAEA sends inspectors. What they find is an enrichment program far more advanced than anything Iran had declared. Thousands of centrifuges spinning at Natanz, enriching uranium to levels far beyond what any civilian energy program requires. The centrifuges are based on designs stolen from the Pakistani nuclear scientist A.Q. Khan, who had built a global black market network selling nuclear weapons technology to Iran, Libya, and North Korea. Iran had been running a covert enrichment program for 18 years without telling the world. And this is the moment the nuclear crisis begins in earnest. Let's walk through the key milestones. 2003. Facing international pressure after the Natanz revelations, Iran agrees to suspend enrichment and allow more intrusive IAEA inspections. Hassan Rouhani, then Iran's chief nuclear negotiator, later brags in a speech that the suspension was a tactical move, used to give Iran time to complete the installation of centrifuge equipment before any real freeze could be enforced. Iran was negotiating in bad faith from the start. 2005. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is elected president. He immediately restarts enrichment activities. He declares that Iran has a sovereign right to enrich uranium and will not give it up, regardless of international pressure. He also begins making statements about Israel that shock the international community, calling for Israel to be wiped off the map and describing the Holocaust as a myth. Combined with the enrichment restart and the ballistic missile program, these statements transform the nuclear crisis into what Israel explicitly starts calling an existential threat. 2006. The UN Security Council passes its first sanctions resolution, demanding Iran suspend enrichment. Iran refuses. More resolutions follow in 2007, 2008, 2010. Iran keeps enriching. 2010. Stuxnet. The joint US-Israeli cyber weapon sabotages approximately 1,000 of Iran's centrifuges at Natanz, causing them to spin at speeds that destroy them, while feeding false data to the monitoring systems. The operation sets back Iran's program by an estimated 2 years. It also demonstrates that both the US and Israel know exactly what equipment Iran has, where it is located, and how it works. 2012. Netanyahu stands at the United Nations General Assembly podium with a cartoon drawing of a bomb. He draws a red line, literally on the diagram, at 90% enrichment, and says Israel will act militarily if Iran crosses it. He is widely mocked in the international media for the visual, but his underlying message is serious, and it is consistent. Israel will not allow Iran to obtain nuclear weapons under any circumstances, whatever it takes. 2015. After years of negotiation, the Obama administration brokers the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. Iran agrees to limit its enrichment to 3.67% purity, reduce its stockpile of enriched uranium by 98%, disable 2/3 of its centrifuges, redesign the Iraq heavy water reactor so it cannot produce weapons-grade plutonium, and accept the most intrusive international inspection regime ever designed for a non-nuclear weapons state. In exchange, the United States and the European Union lift most sanctions. Iran's oil revenues begin recovering almost immediately. The international nuclear community broadly agrees the deal works. With the JCPOA in place, Iran's breakout time, the time needed to produce enough highly enriched uranium for one weapon, is estimated at 12 months. Far from comfortable, but manageable. Then comes May 8, 2018. President Trump withdraws the United States from the JCPOA. He calls it the worst deal ever negotiated. He reimposed maximum pressure sanctions, and Iran, faced with the collapse of the agreement and the return of crippling economic punishment, draws its own conclusion. If the deal can be torn up at any moment by any American president, then the deal provides no real security guarantee. And if there is no security guarantee, there is no reason to maintain the restrictions. Iran begins systematically dismantling every limit the JCPOA imposed. Enrichment resumes, centrifuges are reinstalled, purity levels climb. 3.67%, then 20%, then 60%. By late 2024, Iran has enriched uranium to 60% purity, just one technical step away from weapons-grade 90%. And its stockpile of 60% enriched uranium reaches levels that multiple nuclear physics institutes calculate would require less than 2 weeks to enrich further to weapons-grade levels sufficient for 5 or 6 nuclear devices. 2 weeks. From the moment of a political decision to the moment of weapons-grade material. And then we arrive at the most alarming assessment of all, because by early 2026, the situation has deteriorated even beyond that.
Look at this interest
The
rate.
Institute for Science and International Security, one of the most credible, independent nuclear watchdog organizations in the world, publishes analysis showing that if Iran were to repurpose its existing centrifuge cascades without interruption, its breakout time could be as short as 1 week. 7 days to produce enough weapons-grade uranium for one nuclear device. 7 days. The entire Stuxnet operation in 2010 set back the program by 2 years. The 2015 JCPOA extended the breakout time to 12 months, and by 2026, the cumulative effect of Trump's withdrawal from the JCPOA, Iran's enrichment acceleration, and the expansion of its centrifuge capacity has brought the breakout time down to something that no diplomatic process and no intelligence warning cycle can reliably intercept. 7 days is faster than the UN Security Council can schedule a meeting. 7 days is faster than the IAEA can complete an emergency inspection. 7 days is faster than any conventional diplomatic response. This is the technical reality that drove Israel to act, and it explains why, when Israel and the United States launched their campaign on February 28, 2026, nuclear facilities were among the very first targets struck. Natanz, Fordow, Iraq, Isfahan. The centrifuge halls, the enrichment cascades, the weapons design facilities. But here is where it gets genuinely complicated, because destroying nuclear infrastructure is not as clean as destroying a missile battery or an airbase. Natanz sits under approximately 8 meters of reinforced concrete, with additional soil covering. Fordow is built into a mountain, with the enrichment halls reportedly 80 to 90 meters underground. The specific bunker-busting capability required to penetrate and destroy deeply buried nuclear facilities is limited even for the United States. The GBU-57, Massive Ordnance Penetrator, the largest bunker buster in the American arsenal at 30,000 pounds, is believed to be capable of penetrating approximately 60 meters of earth. Whether that is sufficient to destroy the deepest Fordow halls is genuinely uncertain. Arms control analysts consulted immediately after the February 28 strikes estimated that the centrifuge halls at Natanz had been significantly damaged and the Iraq heavy water reactor had been destroyed. But Fordow remained a question mark, and Iran's nuclear knowledge, its trained scientists, its engineering expertise, its digital weapons design files cannot be destroyed by any bomb. The current Western intelligence consensus, as of early March 2026, is that the strikes have set back Iran's nuclear breakout timeline by an estimated 12 to 18 months. Not eliminated, set back. 12 to 18 months, the same amount of time that Stuxnet bought in 2010. Now let's zoom out to the bigger picture, because the nuclear question does not exist in isolation. It exists inside a chain reaction problem that Israeli strategists have called the most dangerous possibility in the modern world. Here it is. Iran gets a nuclear weapon. Saudi Arabia, which has already signed a civilian nuclear cooperation agreement with the United States and has explicitly said it will match whatever nuclear capability Iran achieves, begins a weapons program. Turkey, which has the largest NATO military in Europe and has been steadily drifting towards strategic independence, decides it cannot be the only major regional power without nuclear deterrence. Egypt, the most populous Arab country, watches Saudi Arabia and Turkey and draws the same conclusion. Suddenly, you have 4 new nuclear powers in the most volatile region on Earth. Countries with recent histories of war with each other, with unresolved territorial disputes, with populations inflamed by decades of sectarian and nationalist grievance. And every one of them with delivery systems capable of reaching every capital in the region. This is what strategists call the nuclear domino effect, and it is why every American president from Nixon to Biden has listed preventing Iranian nuclear weapons as a top-tier national security priority. Not because an Iranian bomb by itself necessarily destroys the world, but because it starts a chain reaction whose endpoint nobody can predict or control. There is one more dimension to this story that almost nobody discusses, and it is the most haunting of all. The question of whether Iran already has the weapon, not the enriched uranium feedstock, the actual device. Because building a nuclear weapon requires 2 things: sufficient weapons-grade fissile material and a weaponization program that designs and tests the non-nuclear explosive triggers, the implosion lenses, the neutron initiators, all the components that actually make the uranium go critical in a controlled chain reaction. The IAEA has documented evidence that Iran ran a structured weaponization program called the Ahmad Plan, at least through 2003. In 2018, Israeli intelligence operatives removed what Israel calls the Iranian Nuclear Archive from a warehouse in Tehran. 55,000 pages of documents, 183 compact disks. The archive, according to Israeli and Western analysts who reviewed it, described a structured weaponization effort called Project Ahmad, which designed a nuclear warhead that could be mounted on Iran's Shahab-3 ballistic missile. The IAEA confirmed the archive's authenticity. Iran says the program stopped in 2003. Independent analysts say the evidence is inconclusive about whether it fully stopped or simply went deeper underground. And here is the question that nobody in the intelligence community will answer publicly. If Iran already completed the weaponization work in secret, then all the centrifuge destruction in the world does not matter, because the design already exists. The knowledge already exists. Given sufficient fissile material, the weapon can be built. And as we have just established, at 60% enrichment, Iran is one technical step and a matter of days away from that fissile material. Let's zoom out one final time. The nuclear question is the question that ties everything else in this series together. The petrodollar deal was built partly to fund the military that protects the region from exactly this scenario. The IRGC proxy network was built partly as a deterrent to make any attack on Iran too costly, to substitute for the nuclear deterrent Iran did not yet have. The sanctions campaign was designed to starve Iran's economy before it could complete the nuclear program. The secret Israeli-Iranian alliance of the 1970s collapsed partly because the Islamic Republic's ideology made a nuclear Iran an existential threat to a country that lives under the permanent threat of annihilation. And the war of 2026 is, at its core, a race against a clock that has been ticking since the day Khomeini decided that the lesson of the Iran-Iraq war was that only the most fearsome weapons guarantee survival. The bombs falling on Natanz and Fordow are trying to reset that clock, but they cannot stop it forever, unless something more fundamental changes. Not just the buildings, not just the centrifuges, not just the leadership, but the strategic calculation that drives every Iranian government, regardless of ideology, to conclude that only nuclear deterrence can truly guarantee the country's survival. Can this war change that calculation, or does it make it stronger? Because every country that has been bombed in the nuclear age and survived without a bomb has wondered whether the bomb would have protected them. Iraq had no bomb in 2003. Libya gave up its nascent program in 2003 in exchange for Western engagement. Both countries saw their governments violently destroyed within years. North Korea has a bomb. North Korea's government still stands. The lesson that Iranian strategists draw from these examples is not difficult to guess. What do you think? Does the 2026 bombing campaign end Iran's nuclear ambitions? Or does it make them more determined than ever? Drop your answer in the comments below. Because next video, we are bringing everything together. Oil prices, gold, Bitcoin, the Federal Reserve, the dollar. All the financial consequences of a prolonged Middle East war landing directly in your portfolio, your mortgage, your retirement account, and your grocery bill. Every thread we have pulled in this series connects to your wallet, and that video is going to show you exactly how. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you there.